I watched the rain streak down the window as Dad loaded the last suitcase into the trunk. And when I turned around with my own bag, there was no space left for me. "Rachel, honey," Mom said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Emma's bringing her violin and her art portfolio. You understand, right? You can take the bus to Grandma's. It's only 2 hours." I understood. I always understood. Emma stood beside the car, her hand already on the door handle, her perfect smile apologetic, but not really. She was 3 years younger, 17 to my 20, and somehow she always needed more. More space, more attention, more everything. "It's fine," I heard myself say, the words automatic, worn smooth from years of use. "I'll catch the next bus." Dad patted my shoulder without looking at me. That's my girl, always so understanding. They drove away, the taillights disappearing into the grey afternoon, and I stood there in the driveway with my bag at my feet, watching the space where they'd been. The bus station was a 40-minute walk. I'd missed the next 2 buses. I'd arrive at Grandma's after dark, alone, explaining why I was late to a woman who would shake her head and say nothing because she'd seen this pattern my whole life. I picked up my bag and started walking. The weight of it pulled at my shoulder, but I barely felt it. I barely felt anything anymore. That was the strange part. Not the anger or the hurt, but the absence of both. Just a vast, empty clarity spreading through my chest like cold water. They hadn't even hesitated. 20 years of being the easy one, the flexible one, the daughter who never made a fuss, and it had led me here, standing in the rain, walking to a bus station because my sister needed space for a violin she'd played twice and an art portfolio for a college application she hadn't even started. The rain soaked through my jacket, my shoes squelched with each step. Cars passed, spraying water onto the sidewalk, and I kept walking. Each step felt heavier than the last. Not from the weight of my bag, but from the accumulation of every moment I'd been asked to wait, to understand, to make room. I thought about calling someone. A friend, maybe. But my phone stayed in my pocket. Who would I call? The friends I'd cancelled on 100 times because Emma needed help with homework, or Mum needed someone to pick up groceries, or Dad needed someone to understand why he couldn't make it to my college graduation because Emma had a recital. The relationships I'd let dissolve because I was always the one who could wait, who could reschedule, who could understand. I kept walking. My clothes were completely soaked by the time I reached the bus station. The woman at the ticket counter looked at me with something like pity when I bought my ticket, and I couldn't even feel embarrassed about it. I just took the ticket and found a seat in the waiting area, water dripping from my hair onto my shoulders. The bus station smelled like diesel and old coffee. I sat on a plastic chair that was cracked down the middle, my bag between my feet, and waited. Around me, other people waited too. A woman with a baby, an old man with a newspaper, a young couple holding hands, all of them going somewhere, all of them with people who'd made space for them. My phone buzzed. Emma. "Thanks for being cool about this. We'll see you at Grandma's. Love you." 3 words at the end, effortless and light, the way you'd sign off on a text to anyone. I stared at them until they stopped looking like language and started looking like shapes. Then I put my phone away. The bus was half empty. I took a window seat and watched the city slide past, then the suburbs, then the long stretch of highway that led to Grandma's town. My wet clothes stuck to the vinyl seat. I shivered. The sun was setting, painting everything orange and red, and I thought about how beautiful it was, and how empty I felt watching it. I closed my eyes somewhere around mile 30 and didn't open them again until the bus pulled into Grandma's town. The sky was fully dark, stars scattered across it like broken glass. I got off the bus and stood on the empty sidewalk, my bag in hand, and looked around at the quiet streets. Grandma's house was dark when I arrived. Not dark like everyone was asleep. Dark like no one was there. I checked my phone. 7 messages. Grandma fell. We're at the hospital. Where are you? Rachel, call us. We need you to pick up Grandma's medication. The pharmacy closes at 8. Rachel, this is important. Why aren't you answering? Never mind, Emma got it, but call us back. I sat down on Grandma's porch steps, my bag beside me, and read them again. The pharmacy was in the opposite direction from the hospital. Emma had driven there, picked up the medication, and driven back. Something I could have done hours ago if I'd been in the car, if there had been space for me. But there hadn't been space. So Emma had to do it. And somehow, looking at those messages, reading the irritation in "Why aren't you answering?" and the dismissal in "Never mind, Emma got it," I felt something crack open inside my chest. Not anger, not even hurt. Just a terrible, clear understanding of how completely invisible I'd become. I called a cab to the hospital. It cost $40 I didn't really have. When I walked into the waiting room, they were all there. Mum, Dad, Emma. They looked up, and I saw the relief, then the guilt, then the quick rearranging of their faces into something that looked like welcome, but felt like obligation. Rachel, finally! Mum stood up. Grandma's stable. She had a fall, but she's going to be fine. That's good, I said. Where were you? Dad asked. We've been trying to reach you. On the bus, like you told me to take. Silence, the kind that acknowledged something without wanting to address it. Well, you're here now, Mom said. That's what matters. Emma was looking at her phone, her violin case propped against the wall, her art portfolio on the seat beside her, taking up space, the way she always did. I sat down across from them and waited, for visiting hours to start, for Grandma to wake up, for something inside me to wake up too. But there was only that cold, clear emptiness, spreading wider and wider until it filled everything. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Someone's phone rang down the hall. A nurse walked past with a clipboard. I watched it all happen around me, feeling separate from it, like I was behind glass. Are you okay? Mum asked after a while. You're very quiet. I'm always quiet, I said. Not like this. I didn't respond. What was there to say? That I'd walked 40 minutes in the rain? That I'd spent 2 hours on a bus while they drove in comfort? That I'd arrived to an empty house? And messages that made me feel like an inconvenience? They wouldn't understand. They never had. We stayed at Grandma's house that night. I took the couch. Emma took the guest room. In the morning, I made breakfast while everyone else slept. Toast and eggs, coffee, orange juice. The motions were automatic, learned from years of being the one who took care of things quietly, who kept the house running, who made sure everyone else was comfortable. I set the table and went upstairs to pack. My bag was still mostly packed. I added a few things. Toothbrush, phone charger, the book I'd been reading. Then I took out my laptop and started searching. Apartments, studios, anything within my budget in the city, far enough from my parents' house that impromptu visits would require planning. Places with 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, space for one person who didn't need to understand or be flexible or make room for anyone else. I found 3 possibilities. I bookmarked them. Then I closed the laptop and went downstairs. They were at the table, eating the breakfast I'd made, talking about Grandma's recovery and when she could come home and who would stay with her. The conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. I ate my toast and said nothing. Rachel, you're quiet this morning, Mum said, finally noticing. Just tired. The couch isn't very comfortable, is it? Maybe you and Emma can switch tonight. I looked at Emma. She was cutting her eggs into precise little squares, not looking up. I'm not staying tonight, I said. Everyone stopped. What do you mean? Dad asked. I'm going back to the city. I'll catch the afternoon bus. But we need to figure out Grandma's care schedule, Mum said. We were hoping you could stay the week and help out. Emma can do it. She has the whole portfolio thing finished, right? And the violin can wait. Emma's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Rachel, that's not fair, Mom said. Emma has her college applications, and I have my job and my life, which I'm getting back to. The words came out calm, measured, final. I watched them land, watched my parents exchange glances, watched Emma's face do something complicated that might have been guilt or might have been annoyance. Since when do you talk like this? Dad said, and there was something in his voice I'd never heard before. Surprise, maybe. Or the first whisper of recognition that something had shifted. Since yesterday, in the rain, walking to the bus station. I stood up, carried my plate to the sink, washed it, dried it, put it away. Then I went upstairs, got my bag, and came back down. They were still at the table, frozen in their seats, staring at me like I'd become someone they didn't recognise. Maybe I had. I'll visit Grandma before I go, I said. But after that, if you need help, ask Emma. She's got the space in the car after all. I left before anyone could respond. The walk to the hospital was short. Grandma was awake, sitting up in bed, looking old and tired but alive. I pulled up a chair and took her hand. Rachel, she said, you came. Of course I came. Your mother said you were difficult about it. I felt something twist in my chest. Did she? Said you took the bus because you were being stubborn. That you've always been sensitive about Emma. I looked at our joined hands. Hers were thin and spotted with age, but her grip was still strong. Grandma, did you know they left me behind yesterday? There wasn't room in the car for me. They chose Emma's violin over me and told me to take the bus. Her grip tightened. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she sighed, a sound full of recognition and old sorrow. I've seen it, she said quietly. For years, I've seen it. The way they turned to her first, the way they expect you to understand. I told your mother once that she was making a mistake, raising you to be so accommodating. She said I was being dramatic. You weren't. No, I wasn't. She squeezed my hand. What are you going to do? Move out? Get my own place? Stop being the daughter who always understands? Good, Grandma said. It's about time. I stayed with her for an hour, talking about nothing important, just being there. When visiting hours ended, I kissed her forehead and left. My family was in the waiting room. I walked past them without stopping. Rachel, wait, Mum started. Goodbye, I said, not slowing down. I took the bus back to the city. This time, I had a window seat by choice, and I watched the landscape blur past with something that wasn't quite peace, but wasn't emptiness either. It was the beginning of something. Purpose, maybe, or just the simple clarity of knowing what I wouldn't accept anymore. My apartment was small and unchanged, but it felt different walking into it, temporary. A place I was living in until I could find the place I wanted to live in. I opened my laptop and sent emails to all 3 apartments I'd bookmarked. Then I called my boss and asked about extra shifts. Everything okay? She asked. Everything's fine, I said. I just want to save up for a move. Good for you. I've got 3 extra shifts this week if you want them. I'll take them all. My phone rang that evening. Mom, I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Dad, voicemail. Emma, Rachel, please pick up. We need to talk about what happened. I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. The messages kept coming over the next few days. Apologies that weren't quite apologies. Explanations that explained nothing. Requests for me to call back, come home, talk this through like an adult. I ignored all of them and went to see the apartments. The first was too expensive. The second had a mold problem. The third was perfect. 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, a bathroom with good water pressure, and a landlord who didn't ask too many questions. I signed the lease the same day. Moving was simple because I didn't have much. Clothes, books, my laptop and a few dishes. Everything fit in my car in one trip. I didn't tell my family I was moving until I was already in the new place, unpacking boxes in a space that was entirely mine. I sent a text to the family group chat. New address, with a pin of the location, nothing else. The responses came fast. Mum: "What? You moved without telling us?" Dad: "Rachel, what's going on with you?" Emma: "Why are you being like this?" I turned off my phone and kept unpacking. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old building with good bones. The floors were hardwood, scuffed but solid. The windows faced east, catching the morning light. The kitchen was barely big enough for one person, but it was mine. The bedroom had space for a bed and a dresser and nothing else, but it was mine. The bathroom had a shower with excellent pressure and a mirror that wasn't cracked, and it was mine. I spent the evening arranging furniture and hanging curtains and putting books on shelves. Every decision was mine. Every choice reflected only my preferences. No one to accommodate, no one to consider. Just me building a space that fit the shape of who I was becoming. The weeks that followed had a strange, quiet rhythm. I worked, I came home, I read books and cooked meals for one and slept in a bed that no one asked me to give up. I didn't reach out, and eventually the messages slowed down, became weekly instead of daily, then every few weeks. They were learning, slowly, that I wasn't coming back to who I'd been. I made new routines, morning coffee on the small balcony, evening walks through the neighbourhood. Weekends spent exploring the city I'd lived in, but never really seen because I'd always been rushing between obligations. I found a bookstore I liked, a coffee shop with good Wi-Fi, a park where I could sit and watch people without feeling like I should be somewhere else. I was learning to be alone without being lonely. 3 months after I moved, Emma called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Rachel?" Her voice was small. "Can we talk?" "We're talking now." "I mean, in person. Can I come see you?" I thought about saying no, about keeping the door closed and the distance intact, but curiosity won. "Fine. Tomorrow at 2. She showed up with coffee and an uncertain expression, standing in my doorway like she wasn't sure she was allowed to enter. I let her in, took the coffee, and sat down on my couch. She sat across from me, perched on the edge of the chair, her hands wrapped around her own cup. "Your place is nice," she said. "It's mine." "Right." She looked down. "Rachel, I'm sorry." "For what?" "For everything. For taking your spot in the car. For not noticing how much you did for me. For us. For not saying thank you or seeing you." I sipped my coffee, waited. "Mum and Dad asked me to stay with Grandma for the week," she continued. "After you left, I did it, and it was hard. She needed help with everything. Medication, meals, getting to the bathroom. I was exhausted. And I kept thinking about how you used to do things like this all the time, and none of us ever thought about how hard it was." "No," I said. "You didn't. I know. And I'm sorry, I really am." She looked up and there were tears in her eyes. "I miss you. Mum and Dad miss you. Can we fix this?" I set down my coffee and looked at her. Really looked at her. At 17, she was still young enough to believe that apologies fixed things, that saying sorry could restore what had been broken. But I was 20, and I'd learnt something in the past 3 months. Some things shouldn't be fixed. Some distances were healthy. "Emma, I don't hate you," I said. "I don't hate any of you. But I'm not coming back. Not to being the person who always understands. Not to making myself smaller so Everyone else can be comfortable. I'm not asking you to. Yes, you are. That's what fixing this means to you. It means me forgiving everything and going back to how things were. But I don't want to go back. I like who I'm becoming. She stared at me, and I saw the moment she understood. Really understood. That this wasn't a phase or a tantrum or something that would blow over. This was permanent. So, that's it, she asked. We just don't have a relationship anymore? We can have a relationship, but it's going to be different. I'm not going to drop everything when you call. I'm not going to rearrange my life to make room for yours. If you want me in your life, you'll have to make space for me the way I spent years making space for you. That's fair, she whispered. Yeah, it is. She left soon after, and I watched her go with something that felt like sadness, but also like relief. The door closing behind her was a good sound. 6 months after I moved, Dad showed up. No warning, no call ahead, just a knock on my door on a Saturday morning. Rachel, he said when I opened it. Can I come in? I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, looking around like he was cataloguing everything. The furniture I'd bought, the photos I'd hung, the life I'd built without them. You've done well for yourself, he said finally. I have. Your mother wanted to come, but I thought maybe I should come alone first, to apologise. I crossed my arms. I'm listening. We took you for granted. I see that now. We always assumed you'd be there, that you'd understand, that you didn't need the same attention Emma needed, because you were stronger, more independent, but that wasn't fair. You were our daughter too, and we failed you. The words were good, careful, probably rehearsed, and maybe 6 months ago they would have been enough. But I'd spent the past half year learning to hear what wasn't being said, and I heard it now. The assumption that his apology would be accepted, that the relationship would resume, that I would fold back into their lives because he acknowledged the hurt. Thank you for saying that, I said. But an apology doesn't change the pattern. You didn't fail me once, Dad. You failed me for 20 years, over and over, and I spent those 20 years thinking that if I was just understanding enough, flexible enough, easy enough, you'd eventually see me. But you never did. Not until I left. We see you now. Because I forced you to. Because I removed myself from the equation. That's not the same as being seen. He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded, a slow, defeated movement. What do you want from us, Rachel? Nothing. That's the point. I don't need anything from you anymore. I needed you when I was growing up. I needed you when I was standing in the rain, watching you drive away. But I don't need you now. I've built a life without you, and it's a good life. So we're just done after everything? We're not done. You're still my parents. Emma's still my sister. But you're not my entire world anymore. And I'm not going to keep breaking myself apart to fit into yours. He left looking older than when he'd arrived, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not victory. Not vindication. Just a quiet settling of accounts, a balancing of scales that had been tilted my whole life. I stood at the window after he left, watching him walk to his car, watching him sit inside for a long moment before starting the engine. He looked up at my window once, and I didn't move back. I just stood there, visible, present, occupying space without apology. He drove away, and I turned back to my apartment, to the life I'd built in the 6 months since I'd chosen myself. A year after that day in the rain, I got a call from Grandma. Your mother's birthday is next week, she said. They're having a dinner. They want you there. Are you going? I asked. Of course, someone has to make sure they behave. I smiled. I'll think about it. You should come, Grandma said. Not for them. For you, to show yourself that you can sit at that table as the person you are now and not fall back into who you were. She was right. She sim was always right. I went to the dinner. I wore a dress I'd bought for myself, drove the car I'd saved up for, and walked into my parents' house like a guest, not a resident. They were all there. Mum, Dad, Emma, a few aunts and uncles. The table was set. The food was elaborate. Everything looked the same as it always had. But I was different. Rachel, Mum said, and there was something fragile in her voice. You came. Happy birthday, Mum. Dinner was strange. Not bad, but strange. They asked about my job, my apartment, my life, like I was someone they were getting to know instead of someone they'd known forever. I answered their questions politely and asked my own. Emma talked about college. Dad talked about work. Mum talked about the garden. We were civil, careful, distant in a way we'd never been when I lived there, when I was woven into every aspect of their lives. At one point, Emma pulled me aside. This is weird, she said. What is? You being here, but not here, like you're visiting instead of coming home. I am visiting. This isn't my home anymore. Does it ever feel like home? Where you are now? I thought about my apartment, the quiet mornings, the evenings when I cooked for myself and read books and didn't wait for anyone to need me. The space that was entirely my own. Yes, I said, it does. She nodded slowly. I'm glad, even if it's weird for us. At the end of the night, when I was leaving, Mum walked me to the door. Rachel, she said, I know things are different now. I know we can't go back. But I want you to know I'm proud of you, of who you've become, even if it means you don't need us anymore. I looked at her, at the woman who told me to take the bus, who'd expected me to understand for 20 years without asking if I wanted to, and I felt something soften inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but the possibility of it someday. I do need you, I said quietly, just not the way I used to. Not in a way that costs me myself. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and pulled me into a hug. I let her. It felt like an ending and a beginning at once. I drove home in the car I'd bought with money I'd earned, to the apartment I'd chosen, through streets lit by lamps that turned the night orange and gold. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Thanks for coming. It meant a lot. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I drove, thinking about the girl I'd been a year ago, standing in the rain with her bag at her feet, watching her family drive away. She'd felt so small then, so invisible, but she'd also been on the edge of something vast and necessary, the realization that she could choose herself, and she had, and I had, and the life that had opened up from that choice was still unfolding, still taking shape, but it was mine, entirely, completely, beautifully mine. When I got home, I parked in my designated spot, walked up to my door, unlocked it, and stepped into the space that held no one's expectations, but my own. I made tea. I sat by the window. I watched the city lights flicker in the distance. And for the first time, in as long as I could remember, I felt whole. Not because I'd gotten revenge, not because my family had suffered or learned or changed into people who saw me the way I'd always wanted to be seen, but because I'd stopped waiting for them to make space for me and had simply found my own ride. The next morning, I woke up early and went for a run. The air was cool, the streets quiet, the sun just starting to paint the horizon, pink and gold. My body moved with easy rhythm and my mind was clear. I ran through neighbourhoods I'd never explored before, past houses where families were just waking up, where lives were unfolding in patterns both familiar and unique. When I got back, I made breakfast. Eggs and toast and coffee just for me. Then I sat down at my small kitchen table and looked at my calendar. Work in the afternoon. Dinner with a friend tomorrow. A book club on Thursday. Small things, normal things, but they were mine, chosen freely, not squeezed into the spaces between everyone else's needs. My phone rang. Mum. I hesitated, then answered. Hi, Mum. Rachel, hi. I wasn't sure you'd pick up. I'm here. I wanted to ask you something. Grandma's having a small get-together next month. Nothing big, just family. She specifically asked if you'd come. A year ago, this would have been a trap, an expectation disguised as an invitation. But I heard something different in Mum's voice now. A question, not an assumption. I'll let you know, I said. I need to check my schedule. Of course, just let us know when you can. I will. We hung up and I sat there for a moment feeling the difference. The way I'd answered without automatic agreement. The way she'd accepted it without pushing. Small changes, but they meant everything. The weeks passed, filled with work and friendships and quiet evenings alone. I went to Grandma's gathering. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because Grandma had been the only one who'd seen me clearly from the beginning, who'd told the truth even when it was uncomfortable. When I arrived, she was on the porch, waiting. There's my girl, she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like lavender and old books. Here I am. And look at you, standing tall, taking up space. I smiled, learning to. Inside the family was gathered. Mum and Dad, Emma, a few cousins. They greeted me warmly but carefully, and I responded in kind. We ate, we talked, we laughed at old stories. But there was a new dynamic now, a subtle recalibration. They asked before assuming. They made space without me having to demand it. It wasn't perfect. Old habits surfaced. Mum started to ask me to help in the kitchen, while Emma stayed at the table, then caught herself. Dad began to explain something I already knew, then stopped and asked my opinion instead. Emma started to take the last piece of cake, then offered it to me first. Small things, but they added up. After dinner, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Mum. She was washing dishes and I was drying, the rhythm familiar, but the feeling different. Rachel, she said quietly, I've been thinking a lot about that day, when we left you behind. I set down the dish I was drying. Okay? I've replayed it in my mind 100 times. The way you looked standing there in the driveway, the way you said, it's fine, like you always did. And I realised you'd been saying, it's fine for years, and we'd been believing you, because it was easier than asking if you really meant it. Yeah, I said. You were. I'm sorry, I'm truly sorry. Not because you left, not because we were forced to see it, but because you deserved better from the beginning. I looked at her, at the tears on her cheeks, at the genuine remorse in her eyes, and I felt the last piece of ice around my heart begin to thaw. Thank you, I said, for saying that, for meaning it. Can you forgive me? Someday. I think so, but it's going to take time, and things can't go back to how they were. I don't want them to, she said. How they were wasn't fair to you. We finished the dishes in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Not empty, not cold, just quiet, with the possibility of something warmer underneath. When I left that night, Emma walked me to my car. You know, she said, I used to think you had it easy, that you never struggled the way I did, that you were just naturally good at everything. I struggled, I said. You just didn't see it. I see it now, and I'm sorry I didn't before. She paused. I'm trying to be different, to not take things for granted, to notice when people are making sacrifices for me. That's good, Emma. That's growth. Are we okay? You and me? I thought about it, really thought about it. We're getting there, I said. It's going to take time, but we're moving in the right direction. She hugged me, and I hugged her back, And for the first time in as long as I could remember, it didn't feel like I was the one holding everything together. I drove home through the city streets, the lights blurring past my windows, and I thought about the year that had passed, about the girl standing in the rain and the woman driving home now, about the death of one life and the birth of another. Rebirth wasn't a single moment. It was a process, a series of choices, each one building on the last. It was saying no when you'd always said yes. It was leaving when you'd always stayed. It was believing you deserved space when everyone had taught you to make yourself small. And it was this, sitting in traffic on a Tuesday night, alone in your car, completely at peace. My phone buzzed, a text from a friend. "Drinks this weekend?" I smiled and typed back. "Yes, Saturday at 7? Perfect. See you then." Simple, easy, a plan made between equals, between people who both showed up for each other, who both made space, who both understood that relationships were built on reciprocity, not sacrifice. When I got home, I parked my car in the spot I paid for, walked up the stairs to the apartment I chose, and stood in the doorway for a moment before going in. The space was dark and quiet, waiting for me to fill it with light and life. My space, my life, my choice. I flipped on the lights and closed the door behind me, and I was home. Not the home I'd grown up in, where I'd learned to shrink and accommodate and disappear, but the home I'd created, where I could expand and exist and simply be. I made tea and curled up on my couch with a book. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, I was still, centered, whole. The protagonist had reclaimed her story. The antagonists had faced their consequences. The karmic balance had been restored, not through revenge or confrontation, but through the quiet, steady act of choosing herself. And in that choice, she had found something more valuable than vindication or closure or even forgiveness. She had found peace. True, lasting, unshakable peace. The kind that came from knowing your own worth. The kind that came from refusing to shrink. The kind that came from standing in the rain, watching the people who should have made space for you drive away, and deciding right then that you would find your own ride. And never ask again.